Hey guys, Patrick Burke with the B Team here in Niagara, talking to you about the Niagara real estate market and what's shaking out there right now. First, this bracket on this microphone has broken for a second time. Now, I haven't had this microphone for that long. This is Audio-Technica, great microphone. But the hardware for it, why is it breaking like that? So I have to order another one, thus the Scotch tape accoutrement. My apologies. So, title of this video is the Niagara region real estate market has a supply problem. It has a demand problem as well, but largely I think in my estimation is we have a supply problem, meaning there's just not enough homes for sale and the data really shows it. Ironically, this sustained market weakness that we've been seeing has been what's been supporting the price rebound that we've seen of late, and we're going to get into that. Let's look at the Niagara region as a whole. The number of new listings in March 2023 is actually going to be in negative territory when compared to the 10-year average, the first time that's happened since January 2022. The difference, January 2022, we had new listing inventory in the negatives, but we had demand up about 15% over the 10-year norm. As a result, that was the kickoff, the catalyst to that ridiculous market we had last Q1. Here, while we've got new listing inventory 8% below normal, we've also got sales numbers well below that. So we have the inverse of what we had last year. Thus, we're experiencing a completely different spring market here in 2023. So yes, new listings in March are down 8% when compared to the 10-year average. Meanwhile, sales are down 21%. So we did have a bit of an improvement January to February. So March 2023, it's definitely a step back. It's not the direction we want to see. But I have some theories that are completely unprovable about why that happened. First, let's look at a graph. Don't be scared. These graphs are very bite-sized. They're manageable. The first one is looking at supply and demand. In general, it's looking at the number of new listings against the number of sales for the Niagara region going back to January 2022. So this graph here shows you in pink the number of homes sold and in gray the number of new listings. And you can see back last summer how huge the gap was, right? New listings way up here, sales way down here. What happened? Prices just absolutely tumbled back down to earth. So as we get into early 2023, it looks better in comparison, definitely, right? But when you compare it to anything historically in general, this early 2023 is still very weak in comparison for overall market activity. So how are sales doing? This graph shows you in pink is 2022 through 2023 for the number of monthly sales against the 10-year average, which is the gray line. And you can see very clearly that that we've been underperforming when you compare it. In fact, March 2023 will be the 11th month in a row where the monthly number of homes sold in Niagara are 20% or more below that 10-year average. Except for February 2023, it was a better month. It had a different flavor. We were all a little bit excited, right? We still are, but we were excited back in February because we finally saw some light at the end of the tunnel. So February, by comparison, was an absolute gold medal winner. It was only 13% below the 10-year average. In fact, I went on record on the podcast saying that by May, we'll be within 10% of the 10-year norm. So certainly here in March, it is a step back from that progress. So when you look at Q1, January, February, March 2023, when you add them all up, the total number of sales is actually on pace to be about 33% below the 10-year norm, 1/3. So that is not great, no matter how you slice it up. However, I think there's some reasons behind that, and it ties into inventory because overall we're feeling a change in the buyer confidence. There is renewed buyer confidence. There is a willingness to interact with the market to get out there and buy a home. But the challenge is, I know we do, and I know lots of other agents have the same situation where they've got a busload of buyers who are trying to find something, but we're back to that whole situation where there's just not the inventory for them to go and get. As I've said numerous times before, we like to keep track of what's going on in St. Catharines, given that the most homes sold on an annual basis happen in St. Catharines in comparison to any other municipality in the region. And the same thing has happened in St. Catharines, as you could probably guess, that happened in the Niagara region. In general, month to month, really low volume, both in terms of new listing and demand. So let's have a look at it right here. Similar to the other graph, the number of monthly sales is in pink. Number of monthly new listings in gray. You can see last year, again, that huge gap in inventory, demand down here, therefore prices came down. We got to the end of the year, the market was exhausted, it was out of gas. That was our low. We've seen a slight rebound in overall activity. We've seen strength in pricing, that's for sure, but only because the relationship between sales and new listings has actually stayed kind of consistent, kind of healthy, even though it's just way down below. So on a monthly basis, the number of new listings January 2023, 8% below the 10-year norm. February, 12% below the 10-year norm. And March, 26% below the 10-year norm. Meanwhile, the number of monthly sales, 43% below the 10-year norm in January. That's way off, right? 43%, 21% off in February, and March is on track to be the same, to be 21% below the 10-year norm for the number of homes sold. So you've got new listings 26% below the 10-year norm, number of homes sold 21% below. So again, there is still that balance. It's just off by a fifth or a quarter from what normal would be, right? As a result, we have seen a 10% increase in home prices from January into March so far in St. Catharines. And again, not because the market's hitting the lights out, it's just because that relationship between demand and the number of homes for sale has maintained some semblance of order. So let's zoom in a little bit and look at new listing inventory very recently. So this here shows you November 2022, the 5-month period for November here till March. And again, March is on pace for numbers, but it's a good sort of fair representation of what's shaking out there, right? And you can see the 10-year normal in gray against what's happening right now in pink. You can see there's sort of a divergence happening, right? We would really like to see that pink line at the gray line because that would be representing something resembling normal. But right now, as we've seen month to month, it's sort of separated and actually got a little bit worse each month. So we're definitely looking for a turnaround of that as we get into April. Fingers crossed that happens. Looking at the monthly number of sales in St. Catharines, going back to June, July of last year, we've had 10 months consecutive of 25 to 45% below the 10-year norm. For 10 straight months, the number of monthly sales has been roughly 25 to 45% below what you would consider to be normal. And here's the kicker. February 2023 was only 21% below. And that was an improvement. That was a holy cow, things are feeling better. We were only 21% below the normal because we had at our worst, we were 45% below the 10-year norm, right? So to be 21% in February, that did feel good. But again, March is on pace to be also about 21%. So we're in this sort of stagnant stalemate, like I mentioned. So I guess in a glass half full, March isn't any worse than February. So we'll take that. Again, I ask you the question, how many buyers would buy a home if the right inventory came in the market today, right? If all of a sudden we had 10 listings over there, 10 over there, 10 over there, 20 over there, how many of these buyers that are on the sidelines would jump in? Would we see those sales numbers skyrocket? I suggest a considerable number. So it's really a waiting game for options right now for buyers. What about prices? They must be terrible, right? In general, when you look at the average sale price trend in Niagara over the last 6 months, it's more or less resembled the letter V. And the low point was in January. How do you make a V again? There we go. Was in January or December, depending where you're looking. And again, we've seen March starting to resemble what October was at of last year. So let's look at some graphs. Hooray! I know, you're pumped. So the Niagara region, again, January was the low point at 637,000. March, as of right now, is sitting at 699. St. Catharines, right here. The low in December, here sitting in March, right now we're sitting about 655,000. Niagara Falls, usually a pretty volatile all over the place city, but again, following that same trend. The low point in December. Here in March, we're sitting around 673,000. Here in Welland, the low point again in December. There was a pretty good bump in February where a lot of higher priced homes sold. So the average in February was 610,000. However, March sort of tracking with that V, sitting around 555,000 as of today. So the next 60 days in the Niagara real estate market is huge. It's a very important spring market because we don't want to see prices do what they did before where they're up 27% or whatever. We just want to see things start to return back towards zero, meaning back towards the 10-year norm where buyers can buy things and sell, and they can sell that. And then that person can buy that and comfortably sell their place. As opposed to right now, as much as there's some certainty in the market, there's also uncertainty. And whenever that enters the equation, people freeze and they stand back and they wait, right? So what we need to see over the next 30, 45, 60 days is all that inventory where people are getting their place ready for sale. That starts to come online and people have options to buy, and then everything sort of loosens up. That is a wrap. Thank you so much for joining me. I will put links down below to all of our social profiles. That's where you can keep track on a day-to-day basis on what's shaking out. Instagram in particular, we put a lot of information out there, little factoids, graphs, hey, did you knows, that kind of stuff. Our podcast, of course, we're putting out great content there. Me and my buddy Sean Delott. our market insight page, our blog page, and our website, all kinds of stuff. So again, just go to the description of this video down below and you can get all those links. Otherwise, take care, stay in touch. And again, if you want to keep track of what's going on in the market, I highly encourage you to subscribe to this channel. I will start, I took, I think, a month hiatus where I didn't put anything on here, and largely because we had to change our physical space, and I'm still trying to figure out that, and I have to get this clip replaced too. I'm rambling. Okay, thanks so much. Take care. See ya. Bye.